Thank you very, very much. And I want to thank all of you who came. I know all of you had other things to do, and you were very, very nice to come here. Uh, I hope you enjoy the evening, and we will do our best to have you enjoy it. The one thing I would like to start with is this. The commonality of what we'll talk about tonight are inventions. And I want you to know that, in fact, every single one of you is an inventor. You simply have not realized it. So that, for example, when you come to work and find a new way, or come to school and find a new way, or if you're in music and you come up with a new melody. In short, humankind could not have progressed without invention. And one way to look at this is the whole history of mankind is a history of invention and moving forward with new ideas and new concepts. And you all have that ability. I don't think that you're going to leave here tonight as inventors, but I would hope that some of you perhaps think a bit differently about things, perhaps the younger people. We have a saying among inventors, and that is, look to the present, think to the future. And look at anything around you, anything. You can be sitting somewhere tonight after this, and look at it and say, what will this be 10 years from now? Will this room look like this 10 years from now? Will the lights be like this 10 years from now? Will my car be like that it is now 10 years from now? That is the way inventors think. And what I'm telling you is it's not a secret, but it's something that too often is not taught in schools. And I think it should be. I think that every student, no matter what they specialize in, no matter what their field of endeavor is, should always think, what will the future be? In that time horizon, it'll turn out, and Joe will explain this later. Joe's very smart, by the way. He's smarter than I am. But the ideal time horizon is about 10 years, and I say that because 10 years is a great horizon, because a patent is roughly 20 years, the life, and one gets the patent through and issued, and then has an ideal life to market the patent or place the patent. So think in terms of that tonight. It's an interesting program, I think. You'll see a varied number of different fields, and we'll both explain it. He'll explain things, I think, a bit more technically, because he's smarter, and I'll probably explain them more simply. So, Joe, do you want to? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Good.
Okay, thank you very much. In fact, I think I may have solved part of the ambassador's question tonight, why Americans aren't liked more, with my legal disclaimer. I apologize for this. But there's actually one important thing on this slide, and that is when you actually go to file a patent, it's very important to maintain the secrecy of your idea before you file it. And so if you've got the idea for the next Google or something, please don't mention it in Q&A, because I want you to be able to get a patent on it. And otherwise, I think you can ignore this. And if we say anything too crazy, don't blame it on ASCF. It's just, thank you. It's just us. My dad's a medical doctor with a lot of patents in a lot of different fields. One thing I want you to know is we principally work alone. There are many times we have collaborated with other inventors, or we'll use consultants with technical expertise that we don't have. But by and large, virtually every patent that I show you is going to be something that we were able to do using relatively little resource. And I think that's one thing I really want you to remember from tonight, because I think when you think of a patent and inventor, you sort of imagine some extraordinarily expensive laboratory, lab coats, and expensive equipment. And it can look like that, but it frequently doesn't. And I'll show you some pictures later on. But I think for that reason, I'm hoping that this is maybe particularly relevant for the group tonight. This is where my grandfather is from, Crow. So I had to put it up here. It's a village outside Moscosolata. And he was part of a large group of people from the Prekmuri region in the early 20th century that came to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is a sister city of Moscosolata, and we have a very nice Slovenian community to this day there. One thing, since I have your attention, and I really am going to get to invention, that I want you to know, is the reason all those folks came to the U.S. was to work at a place called Bethlehem Steel. And so Bethlehem Steel at that time was the largest company in the United States, made the steel for all sorts of great American landmarks and icons, Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, Golden Gate Bridge, and many, many others. So when you visit the U.S. and you see those buildings, I just want you to be aware that Slovenians helped to build all these buildings through steel fabrication. And this is our old Prekmuri dialect. This is an ad from 1928 from my grandfather's store. But to my point about everybody being inventors, my grandfather never filed a patent, but he did do something very interesting in terms of developing a method for treating coccidiosis, which affects chickens, by essentially putting charcoal in the feed. And when my dad and I were in Moscosolata a few days ago, we learned about some work his brother Janos was doing in Maribor at the same time, innovating the beehive. And I say this because it's important to think about invention in this way. It doesn't have to be this complex imagery. Do you want to say anything about that, or I continue? Okay.
If you raise chickens, and we raise many, many chickens on our farm, the really bad disease of chickens is coccidiosis, and it can literally ruin a whole barn full of chickens in 24 hours. And it's spread through blood in the droppings, and then the other chicken eats it, and then they have it too. And my father, on his own, put charcoal, this is, God, years ago, he put charcoal in the feed. And that changed the red to black, and it cured coccidiosis. And then he became known for that, and the University of Pennsylvania came and examined how he did it, and till this day, that is the treatment in the U.S. for coccidiosis. There you go.
Okay. All right. Now we'll talk a little bit about patents. This is a patent. This is actually this is a software patent oriented towards interactive marketing. This is something we filed, or my father filed back in 2001, which contemplated what we call click-enabled video, meaning that you would be able to click on an object in a video sequence. Think of a video, think of clicking on a person in a video or an object, and learn more about it or buy it. And this is a good example, and I'll give you some examples where we weren't right, where a need developed in this sort of 10-year time horizon. Because in these intervening 10 years, while it took for this patent to issue, all the young people, many of them, started watching their content on tablets and on the computer, which naturally enable you to enjoy interactivity with the content. Back in 2001, that was a bit futurismo. We were all watching on television. And this is I think is a very interesting system, and this is actually something we run as... Go ahead. I'm going to see the video.
No, just before he plays the video, this is a really exciting video. And this is now adopted in the U.S. by Nike and by Walmart. Are going to use the system you'll see on the video. Everything he said is accurate, but a little bit of a different slant. What we saw coming is, in the U.S., the younger generations tend to DVR the programs. They don't watch live television. they tend to copy it, then watch it at their leisure, and then skip over the ads. And this has become a very, very serious issue because advertisers are finding that they pay large amounts of money for features on television and film, and they don't get a return because no one sees the ads. Now, where we thought when we filed this, and this patent was fought by virtually every big name in Silicon Valley, that this not issue. That's why it took so long. This concept was a concept which I believe will be a fact in very few upcoming years. Namely, that the advertising in the future will be in the program. It won't be separate. So for example, Ford Motor Company will pay for a series, and in that series will be Ford automobiles and various items that are in the actual program. And that will replace that annoying advertisement that's every 2 or 3 minutes to go to an ad and on the half hour and hour. So when you see this, you're going to see some boxes, just because this is the one we brought with us. They're not in existence on the one currently in use, and just enjoy it. But every time you see a box, you'll see you can buy that item if you're watching this. So I hope the volume's high because young people love this music.
Okay.
It's Fatboy Slim, by the way.
It's a wonderful night, gotta take it from me. It's a wonderful night, come on and break it on down. It's a wonderful night, gotta shake it for me. It's a wonderful night, come on and break it on down. It's a wonderful night, everybody can see. It's a wonderful night, come on and break it on down. It's a wonderful night, go ahead and release. It's a wonderful night, come on and break it on down. You know the music search engine need a tune up. Soon as they out the gate, they all wanna hit a corner, Well, that was cool, but then I heard a rumor, Your crew was riding for the white glittered over, Well, let me tell you how we do it in California. We'll have you on the run just like a puma. If it don't move us, ain't paid your dues and it ain't gon' get our groovers on. We lose you to the consumer solution. Come on, it's a wonderful night. Gotta take it from me. It's a wonderful night. Come on and break it on down. It's a wonderful night. Gotta shake it for me. It's a wonderful night. Come on and break it on down. Girl, I want it, you got it. Your body's like a narcotic. The thought is autoerotic. Come on and break it on down. Can I get it on credit against your brick house? I bet it. Take it as far as you let it. Come on and break it on down. Come on, it's a wonderful night. Gotta take it from me. It's a wonderful night. Come on and break it on down. It's a wonderful night. Gotta shake it for me. It's a wonderful night. Come on and break it on down.
Okay, so that patent is for Churda to an operating company that my brother Justin runs in Los Angeles. He's a very talented young entrepreneur. He's also a Slovenian citizen, like my dad and myself, which I'm very proud of. And it's a, I mentioned before that viewers are going to tablets and computers, and I think it's attracting a lot of attention because advertisers are paying less for interactive ads than for traditional television viewing. So this creates a margin pressure, which creates the need for a new revenue stream. And of course, this, you can also, with the interactivity, give not just commerce, but information and other features for the user. And so far, Nike, Target, Walmart are using it, and we hope you'll hear a lot more about this company in the future. Now we're going to go to the drug business. And my dad tells this story the best, so I'm going to give you the mic.
This process is really in use throughout the world. When you make drug, it starts out, and I'll explain it in a second, as cotton candy, but when you make drug, you use what they call a nonpareil, which is a little circular object, like a little bead, and then you coat that with the drug. And those are the little beads you see in some medications you take. The problem with that was that it took up too much space, and it led to relatively high doses of drug for the activity of the drug. This began by my one daughter, because we have 5 children and one daughter. And when she was little, she wanted to go in Pennsylvania to a carnival for cotton candy. And so I took her, and when she wanted the cotton candy, I went up to the spinner, which you see there. And what was fascinating is the sugar was going in as crystalline sugar, still is till this day. When you go and see cotton candy, watch it close. It goes in crystalline, but it comes out amorphous. So you actually have a change in structure of the sugar caused by the spinner. And the curiosity I had at the time was, what if I put drug in with the sugar? Would the drug be destroyed by the heat, or would it survive? Because if it would survive, then that led to a whole genre of quick dissolve tablets. And in point of fact, that's what I did. It was a gold medal spinner, and I ordered about 4 or 5. Put the drug in, and sent that off to North Carolina to be analyzed, only to see if there was breakdown, if the heat broke down the drug. In fact, the drug did not break down. None of it did. And so that spawned a new business called Fuse Technologies, which then made this. Now, it's interesting, and again, especially you younger people, think of it this way. Why didn't it break down? And it was because it was flash heat. You see, when a drug breaks down, if you look it up in a chemical index, you'll see what heat it was placed under in a pan for how long before it degraded. And of course, the one thing you want to look at is how long. Because what was interesting with this was, if I'm the sugar molecule, and let's just say I'm mixed with paracetamol, and shrink ourselves down, all of you are tiny now, and we're inside a spinner, and it's spinning, and it's trying to throw us out, and this is all heated on the edge. And that's a hot mesh. So I'm the paracetamol and sugar. I'm cool here. And as it spins, I go toward this door, because this is the way out. This is the circle of the spinner. So I'm cool. I'm getting a little bit warmer. That's the exit. I'm warmer. I'm hot, I'm out. And the result is that heat is so small a period of time that there is no breakdown. So that spurned a company, eventually bought by BioVale and Valiant. But it also caused a whole new genre of pill production, because if you didn't put any sugar in and you use the same theory with pure drug, then just as you look up in the sky and the planets are round, that's because of surface tension. And so the drug too, pure drug, would be spun out that door the same way, but since it was a liquid for a brief second, it would solidify as a perfect circle. So now you had pure drug in a tiny bead. And that probably is the most popular drug product now in the world for making various products. And this company was bought by BioVale, and now it's Valiant. But it all started with a cotton candy spinner. So think of the beginning of this session. Always look and observe. There's a comical part to this, because Gold Medal was a small company in Cincinnati, and subsequently I ordered 20 machines to make all kinds of drugs. And I got a letter from the president of the company, and I did correct it, but I got a letter from the president of the company, and he said, Dr. Fuse, I note your order for 20 machines, and this is the greatest number of machines we have ever in our history sold to a physician. And this is a wonderful sign, because it shows that physicians are beginning to recognize that they can make money in cotton candy. Of course, I corrected it. So here, go ahead.
But just again, returning to this theme of invention not necessarily being complex. The cotton candy is a known process. It's been around for a long time. It'll be around forever. And literally, that was pretty much the final commercial process. Actually, my dad had the largest cotton candy spinner in the world built, ultimately.
The ultimate one that we had made for production made 1 ton per hour for cotton candy.
But it was precisely the same principle. And so what I'd like you to take away from this slide is the idea that you can invent something significant, simply by taking a known process and applying it for a new application. In this case, drug.
Let me just say something, Joe, for a second. Yeah. I'll hurry. Father, I won't go over. No, what it also should show is that 2 people can do something. That you don't have to have a huge company, and that 2 people can do something. And I hope no academics take offense, and I hope no company people take offense at what I'm going to say here. But an advantage of the new inventor, such as us, is that you don't know what can't be done. And frequently what stops inventions in large companies is this ingrained feeling that something is impossible, that cannot be done. And the mere fact you don't know that allows you to go and do it.
So actually, my dad started this whole company in the guest house of our home in Pennsylvania at the time, in Bethlehem. The intellectual property went on to become quite complex, but truly all based on that initial process. And as my dad had mentioned, the drug microspheres were really one of the most exciting parts of the system, because that round sphere of drug allowed you to easily apply a coating to the drug with great accuracy. It was a public company in Ireland, Germany, Italy, and it inspired our entry into another form of drug delivery, because there was one problem with the tablet, not the microsphere. And that is, and you'll understand this if you've ever bought cotton candy for yourself or your kid, it loved water. You wanted to attract water all the time. And water is an enemy. Do we have anybody from the drug business here? Maybe, okay. Well, anyway, water is an enemy of drug stability. All things being equal, if you get water into your drug, over time you're going to have trouble. And so to keep the water away from the product, you needed expensive packaging. And so something we were very interested in was, could we stay in quick dissolve, but have a system that would dissolve quickly, but would essentially be more inert, that wouldn't attract water, to get us away from that packaging problem. And this was the answer that we came up with. Thin film, what's called a thin film dosage form. Those are conventional tablets on top, just for contrast. But the thin film dosage form, is generally a fairly inert polymer, but it has this massive surface area, and it's quite thin. And because of that surface area, despite being comprised of inert polymer, it'll actually dissolve quite quickly. And so this was going to get us around the water problem. Now, we got really excited about it, and we looked at the art, and what we determined at that time was that no one had taught how to make these films uniformly. And by uniformly, what I mean is that each film would have the same dose. Because film is made it's made almost like a newspaper press when you make it. It's a big web. And so you have to make sure that the drug doesn't migrate to different areas, because the only way you can really dose it is by cutting it to how much drug you're expecting. So you have to have the same amount of drug across the whole web to do that. And that's, this is something, that's very important as you start to think about inventing and patenting, is that you need to focus your patent claims on areas that are essential to the product. If I patent an aspect of a product that's not essential to the end user, the patent's not going to be valuable, right? I've got to patent something that you really need for this product. So this spawned, I don't know, probably quite a few patents. I referenced the 150 as something that my dad and I, our inventors, along with 2 other gentlemen, Gary Myers, a brilliant scientist, and Bob Yang, Developed this largely in a former tile shop in Northern Virginia. And my dad and I used to make films on a table actually smaller than this when we were essentially practicing. Those went on to become the basis for a company called Monosol RX, which is public knowledge. Monosol RX makes, probably not many people familiar with this drug, Reckitt-Benckiser Suboxone. And this is the new treatment for heroin addiction that's replaced methadone because it's much safer and can be given out by regular doctors. And this was, this was an enormous kind of milestone in drug delivery history because Suboxone was made a tablet that the patent was running out and the exclusivity was running out. And so Reckitt was essentially able to take a $1.2 billion drug and move $1 billion, one of those $1.2 billion into film. And even today, they've been able to maintain sales, I think about 900 million. So, from the perspective of using a patent to protect an existing product in the drug business, it's actually the greatest success, in modern drug delivery, if you're interested in drug delivery. This is actually a funny patent. I call this a chicken soup patent because one of the uses. Let me go back to this film. You can deliver, when you just put it, you can deliver drug for two reasons, or in two essential ways. I can swallow that. I can have that film dissolve in my mouth and swallow it. The drug into my GI tract where it's absorbed, which would be the way you would take ibuprofen or paracetamol, what have you. There are other drugs that are well suited to being absorbed in the cheek. Nicotine would be a good example of that. Fentanyl, a lot of your opioids are delivered that way. And for those, when you want to deliver a drug in the cheek, the stomach is your enemy because the drug gets metabolized in the liver. Right? So I want all of my drug to be absorbed across the cheek, which means that I want it all to go into the cheek and not to be swallowed. One way you can attempt to solve that is by making a two-layer film. I can have one layer that has drug in it, and then I can have an outer layer that doesn't have acting as a backing layer to prevent the drug from being swallowed while it's being absorbed. The problem is films are a lot harder to make than you think. And they're especially hard to laminate and put together if you want to make a bilayer film. So we asked ourselves, could we make a film that would act like a bilayer film by just making one film? And this was this chicken soup concept. If you ever make chicken soup and you put it in your refrigerator, the top is the fat, right? Fat doesn't like water. It's hydrophobic. It's going to go to the top. So all we did in this system is we use the fat, and when the film is being cast, the fat naturally goes to the top and forms a backing layer to the film. And this is a very crude example just because it's from our labs. But you see the drop of water, the fat layer is acting as your insoluble layer on the back. And if you were to go to the other side of the film, it would readily dissolve in water.
I just want to explain the physiology because it's interesting. If you put a drug against your cheek, it's absorbed down and it goes through various veins directly to your heart, and then it's pumped out. So in that case, only a small fraction goes to the liver. And of course, the liver is the deactivator of drugs. All right? So if you swallow the drug, your GI tract is drained right to the liver. So the net result is that there's a huge advantage to what they call mucosal delivery. And it's a simple term they use. They say avoidance of first pass. And it's a fancy way of saying it avoids the liver. And first pass, think of it, if you put it in your cheek, your saliva's in your mouth. So you don't want your saliva to start etching away at the drug, and then you swallow it, and therefore you dilute the effect. So what this basically does, as Joe said, is it assures you that all your drug is going through the cheek, all is avoiding first pass, and the dose is much better and much more uniform. That's all.
Okay, good. So, This is actually kind of an obvious slide, continuing to mine your field of expertise. In some ways, it's valuable to be an outsider because you don't know what the limits are. In other ways, when you know an area, it's easy to keep doing it. So, historically, we've been focused on these Spastisol films in the drug business. Then we got interested, because we had been doing some work for a tobacco company, in the idea of could we make a safer tobacco product that would effectively deliver nicotine.
Without burning.
What?
Without burning.
Without
There's no burning, so no carcinogen.
Well, right. If anybody's interested in tobacco harm reduction, I'm happy to talk about it when we're but I don't want to start. Anyway, it's a long, So we wanted to make a slower dissolving film. This product actually looks the same, but we were able to patent it because we use a different process. So rather than casting it with moisture in it, this is made by hot melt extrusion. We essentially melt the polymer with the micronized tobacco in it, and it just forces out a slot die and an extruder. So this is maybe a good example of a similar product, patentable because through the use of a different process, and a very valuable patent because the process was actually essential to getting the slow dissolve attribute, which really is required for nicotine delivery. And that's a patent that's public record, is assigned to Philip Morris International. This is fascinating because, as you may have gathered, we've had my dad, and since I've been working with him, we've always been interested in how to administer drugs more easily, particularly for people who have trouble swallowing tablets. So my dad, who truly is the smarter one of the two of us, my dad said one day, "Why do people use water to swallow tablets?" And the answer is, well, there's one good thing about water: it has a neutral pH. That's sort of the best thing you could say about water for that purpose. Otherwise, people use it because it's there.
The worst thing that possibly.
Right. So we basically, we went to sort of the first principles of the rheology of water and fluid dynamics. And could we change water so that it would be easier for you to swallow your tablets? And the answer is, we could. We could patent it. We did it very successfully. The problem was, seeing 10 years into the future or 5 years isn't always that easy. And we thought if we could patent this, no problem. Everyone would want to do this. The reality is, we got a very different response from the industry. They said it'd be too expensive to ship the liquid. The pharmacy wouldn't want to dispense it. They thought the consumer would be confused. We originally made it in cherry flavor, and then every drug company would complain. They wanted it in lemon or grape or something. It just never got there. It's in informal use today. Go ahead.
No, so because of the weight of water, that product was not commercialized. However, until this day, about I'd say twice a month, I receive a phone call, usually from a nurse, and mostly in the HIV field, mostly with children or in cancer care of children. And they'll say to me, "Dr. Fuse, we know you have a patent, but we have a very ill child, cannot take these tablets. Please tell us how to do it." And I'll tell you all how to do it. It's not as good as this, because a lot of rheology has changed, because water truly is horrible. It's the worst thing for a tablet. It's the worst thing because of the same reason that the space shuttle works. You can send a space shuttle up without burning up because of a simple, and all you people in physics will understand this, a simple concept called boundary layers. And of course, with the satellite, the air is the boundary layer, and the temperature keeps changing to each layer. That's what this product does, is it creates a boundary layer over the tablet such that the tablet is lifted off the tongue and you don't even know you swallowed it. And we know how well this works because we did focus groups. And literally I saw with my eyes, old women crying that for 40 years or 38 years they had not swallowed a tablet. And for the first time they swallowed it, they didn't even know they did. So anyway, to finish the story, one of the ways that's not quite as good, but it works very well, any of you who need this, just take Jell-O, take Gas-X, or any product you buy in a pharmacy that has simethicone in. That's a lubricant, makes things slippery. Put one Gas-X in with the Jell-O, mix it, put it in your fridge. Don't let it get solid. Just before it's going to get solid, that it's still liquid, but it's thick. Take it out and let your child or whoever use it. They won't even know they swallowed the tablet. So that's what the informal use is.
And we won't see you for patent infringement. You have a license. This is, again, this is the same area. This is actually kind of a funny story. I have two little kids. My BlackBerry keeps pinging one Saturday, and I'm playing with my kids. This is my farmer. It's my dad. He says, "Why are you answering my email?" I said, "Well, I'm playing with the kids." He says, "No, we're going to change the shape of the tablet." So this is the start of the effort that became the Saturn tablet. Now this, again, I mean, in terms of, learning from mistakes, but also looking to the future, we knew that commercially we couldn't convince people to use a different liquid when they took tablets. We also know that, for film, for the film delivery system, it's relatively expensive compared to tableting, so only premium products tend to attract it. So the question was, could we improve swallowing without really adding cost to the manufacturer? And we came up with this invention, which is quite, I think, counterintuitive, because I think naturally, if I asked you what shape tablet you would swallow most easily, you would imagine a very streamlined shape. And it turns out that what actually causes transit failure when you're taking a tablet is it's not the shape or any resistance associated with the shape. It's the adhesion dynamic of the tablet, because the tablet has to be designed for dissolution in the stomach. So it has to have a tendency to dissolve. And so when you get when you have a large contact surface area with the esophagus, you're more likely to see adhesion.
This is my phone. This is your esophagus. If I take the phone this way, because how much surface area is touching the esophagus? So it's much harder to slide. If I take this phone and I make sure that only a portion of it can touch, now it transits very easy. That's the purpose of that ring. That can't lay flat. So go ahead, Joe.
So the ring, so this ring, to minimize the surface area, is what we call the Saturn ring, the Saturn tablet. And now, at the risk of embarrassing ourselves, I'm going to show you when I say you really don't need a big lab to invent. I'm going to prove it to you. This is a soft gel, a liquid gel, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and it was the easiest thing to start manipulating. So these are actually some of the original pictures my dad was sending me that day as he's manipulating liquid gels. And the test he created for this, our first artificial esophagus, was a piece of adhesive tape. So the liquid gel on the left, in the picture on the left, is conventionally shaped. He's contorted the shape of the liquid gel on the right to make a smaller contact patch. And then he throws a glass of water at it to see which one ejects.
A hose.
Okay, hose, excuse me, pardon me. A hose. And lo and behold, the one with less surface area ejects, and the conventional shape adheres. So that was a sort of a very early proof of concept using store-bought soft gels, pliers, and Scotch tape.
Well, leave that up for a second.
Yeah,
All you young inventors, don't let anybody tell you you need labs, parking lots, people, big budgets, startup, venture capitalists, who I don't like, venture capitalists, they take everything away from you. That's what you need. That tablet is one of the most popular new tablets in the world, and that's the tools it was made with. And you can do that yourself at home.
So here we got just a little more sophisticated. we had the Scotch tape, we said, well, someone must have done a model sometime to simulate swallowing a lab. And it actually turned out there was no model anybody had ever done. So we invented our own test with ejection from a beaker. We were playing around with different designs. Again, just modeling play. Pretty crude stuff, but accurate. And ultimately, are we okay on time?
No,
Okay.
we're fine.
So ultimately, then we did an actually clinical study where you build tablets around a magnet. You can trace them down the esophagus with different swallowing volumes and positions, etc. And the clinical study demonstrated the improvement of the Saturn, both in terms of speed and reliability over the conventional ship.
Wait, now let's look.
Okay.
Give me this. You see on this diagram, see this word helicopter? See how well this did? It did better even than the Saturn. Now, what I want to get across to you is, how did that happen? That happened because I was watching a tree in our backyard in Beverly Hills drop a seed. And when I was a little kid, those seeds, we'd call them helicopters because they'd fall down like this. And I was looking at one of these seeds and I thought, oh, why did nature, because nature is the smartest. Nature knows better, and if you can just see into why nature did it. And when I looked at this close, think of that helicopter. It has the seed pod. It has a wing coming off it. And if you watch that carefully, if it falls on concrete, a little wind blows up, and God made it so the wind blew it off the concrete. It falls on the ground. In other words, it's actually designed in a way to reach the ground regardless. And hence, when you look at that, what is unique about it? Totally asymmetrical. If it were symmetrical, it would fall on the concrete and it would stay on the concrete. So all you young people there, look at nature. Just try and look at nature. Interestingly, it's a bit of a sidelight, but I used to love the Concorde. I spent a lot of years in the Middle East, and the Concorde was just a necessity for me. And if you study the origin of the Concorde, it was designed off a bird called an egret. And pull up an egret on your computer, and if you see an egret taking off, you will see a Concorde. The same shape, everything the same as an egret. Because at Boeing, who I know well, birds are what they study. Because birds are how you learn to make an airplane. So anyway, here, Joe.
This is maybe a little hard to envision from the diagram. This is an email patent, also about the same lineage. I think it's about 2001 filing. And the concept of this patent was that I would control email traffic through a routing hub by embedding the ultimate address. I think we actually had some other ideas in mind, but this has actually become quite interesting in the modern era because there are all these businesses that need to control your email traffic because they're afraid you'll deal directly with someone. So you go to HomeAway and you want to rent an apartment from the seller, but they don't want to give you his or her actual address. Instead, you go through you go through essentially a routing hub by forwarding an email. I'm sorry, I find it less exciting in the drug business, so I'm going to continue.
Wait, did you? Well, say who bought it. Very
No,
large.
I don't think we're supposed to say.
Well, but you can say that one.
No,
One of the largest companies.
Okay, this is a cautionary tale. Diagnostic diapers. This is one of my dad's first inventions. Do you want to talk about this? Or do you want me to cover?
This is just something. I don't like VCs. I told you that. And I also don't like lawyers. I'm sorry because you're probably law students here. This a baby can't talk, and most diseases of a baby can be picked up the earliest in the urine. It's very difficult, as you know, to get a urine sample from a baby because they don't urinate on command. What this patent was a way in which this very a normal diaper simply had a channelized receptacle here, worked male or female, and then a valve using a sterile French sponge, if you're aware of those. They vastly swell if they get wet. And it sealed off this sac. And then the sac contained the various type of colorimetric testing devices for urine for children, white blood cells for infection, et cetera, sugar. This was patented within a matter of weeks at that time, and they still exist, I guess, Joe. They were the biggest in this field of making these sticks, C.R. Bard. Bard called and paid me a lot of money for this. But I didn't know enough to put minimums on it. In other words, and remember that way, if ever you sign a patent to somebody, insist on minimum royalties. I didn't. And unfortunately, what C.R. Bard did was they never wanted this to reach market because it threatened their own products. They bought it for a sizable sum of money from me, and since I didn't have minimums, it was buried forever. Until this day, you can't buy a diagnostic diaper because of C.R. Bard. So always be careful. Be careful of minimums and lawyers.
Actually, I think on Kickstarter, somebody's doing one. It was a pretty cool project.
You could ask, who do I like? I'm eliminating.
My dad really likes wristwatches, so we followed us.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's a good picture. This is a Cipher wristwatch with counter-rotating bezels for a Cipher.
This stops the NSA from ever knowing what you're writing. And this will be in an app shortly. Done hopefully in Perkmuri into an app. And no more snooping. You can't break this code.
Then they'll like Americans even more.
Wow. Oh, okay.
Okay. Listen, I know we're running late, so just a few more.
You're not.
Okay, well, okay, so, just some things on the idea phase. We think of, for us, 5 to 10 years is the way, there are many ways to patent, but this is the way we approach it. We try to think in a 5 to 10 year horizon. We found that if you think too much in terms of immediate needs, there's a very good chance you're going to have a hard time getting a patent because you're going to run into prior art problems. At the same time, if you look too far into the future, you can end up with a patent that's just before its time. And unfortunately, we've seen that happen in a number of instances where it just takes the industry longer to catch up with your idea than the life of the patent. Thinking of field of invention, there's a lot of truth to the idea the outsider is better off because he doesn't have wearing the blinders of how things are already done. The flip side is it's good to have some base understanding, so you're not throwing a dart into the dark, not knowing how the industry's
See,
going.
he's a lawyer, you notice how he took it the other way.
Okay, well let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you something. The next one to tell you. This is actually a good point for the lawyers in the room, because law really is seldom about enforcement because litigation is too expensive. So the law really is about what people have to respect the law and basically implement it themselves. And for that reason, I would suggest to people to think a little bit about the culture of the industry as it goes to patents. There are a lot of companies like Google that will, where they'll send their general counsel will openly boast that he doesn't pay to license patents, and if you don't like it, you sue Google. So, all things being equal, I like to focus in areas where the culture is more to respect patents. And traditionally, the pharmaceutical business, because there's so much investment that goes into new products, they tend to have a more conservative approach to patents, and so they're more willing to license than in some other fields. Some thoughts on preparing patent applications. I can't emphasize this enough. I really believe if you're passionate about your idea, you can search the prior art better than anybody can do it for you because no one will care more than you can. And while I just criticized Google for not licensing patents, they've got a wonderful free database. which makes it very easy to access and go through them. And if we have any kind of historians do we have any historians here? Anybody study history? I always like to think of prior art as kind of an intellectual history of the field. You want to go back and look at what the innovations were, what the needs of the industry were, what the limits on products and processes. And if you understand the past in the field, then I think it really helps you to focus on the aspects of your invention that are novel. Because you generally start with a really broad invention, but you're going to have to, your patent claims are much narrower than that. And so you really need to, knowing the past helps to direct you. I can see you.
I like to fight with Google, and he doesn't. On the patent histories, be careful, because often you'll come up with an idea that's workable, and then you'll search the prior art, and you'll think, oh, gosh, it's been thought of. Well, don't jump to that conclusion. Read every word in the patent, because what you might find is that, in fact, the patent is different, and it perhaps appears to cover the same idea you have, but it may do it in a different way, which means that it's free and it's open. So don't look at it and be discouraged right away. You have to study it. On the other hand, about 5 weeks ago? It's just anecdotal. We had developed a superior oar, for a boat for rowing. And we were cleaning out the swimming pool. And notice the force with which, when you put a net with fine holes through a swimming pool, the force you need is incredible. And then I covered the net with a piece of wood. And the force with the net was virtually more than with the wood. And so we designed an oar that was an oar, but had holes in the center, so that you had two forces. You had the force against the water, and you had the force similar to the Venturi force of the water trying to go through the hole and creating another vector to the side. Then those vectors are additive, and you end up with a more effective oar, which as you turn, it diminishes it. And just what Joe said, getting down to searches, what did he find? But in 1936 in Paris, somebody invented that.
To my dad's point, don't get discouraged. If I find a patent that's close, I'll read it at least 4 or 5 times. And 70% of the time, you'll figure out a way around it, maybe a little higher than that. That's just an example of an area we've been active in recent years, reduced risk tobacco. The whole history of that patent art has been oriented towards efficiency, making more cigarettes with less material. And once you understand that that's the entire theme, if you can deviate, if you can use a somewhat inefficient process and it gives you a result you like, then it actually, thematically at least, you're on your way to getting your patent. Some lawyers don't like to do this. I like to describe the prior art when we write patent applications, because I want the examiner to see that prior art the same way I do. So I try to write essentially the narrative history for the examiner. And again, I think that the discipline of that history, I think, helps you. And it saves you a lot of money, and I think it ultimately saves you time. US and European patent systems have largely been harmonized. There are a lot of things I don't like about the US legal system, but in patents, there are a couple things that are great. One, we have accelerated review. If you're over 65, you've been an inventor over 65 years in age. There's also a new pilot program where they're letting people pay for this. That's really wonderful, because if you can get into the pilot program, or if you can get this review, you'll get an office action within 1 year. And your real cost of prosecution, the single biggest driver is time. 10-year patent prosecution, that's going to be expensive no matter what. If you can get a patent issue in a year or two, you're in dramatically better shape. Also in the U.S., and of course, any foreign applicant can avail yourself of these. You don't have to be based in the U.S. Examiners are much willing to interact with you. I like face-to-face meetings. We'll also do conference calls sometimes too. And I find that's very helpful because generally speaking, even, and I think European examiners are a little smarter than American examiners, but the people really don't know the subject matter all that well. And if they're reasonably open-minded, hearing from you directly can be very helpful.
I just want to add that the age, if you're over 65, you have it examined in 1 year. The other advantage is when you talk to the examiner, you basically can say to the examiner, please, I may not be alive that much longer at my age, so please try and hurry. Normally they do. So I think that's why he keeps me around.
You know, there's controversy about patenting. I don't want to talk about it too much. If someone wants to ask questions about it, you're not going to offend either one of us. In the U.S., I don't know, in Europe, this troll metaphor is very, I don't know if troll translates. The ugly guy under the bridge who yells at you when you want to go across. So, you know, but generally, the most vocal proponents of this troll are often the largest kind of Silicon Valley companies who themselves actually file more patents than anybody else. And when you really look at their reform proposals from the perspective, admittedly, of independent inventor, what the proposals are really designed to do is make it more expensive to get patents and harder, more expensive for small companies to enforce them. And so they would, you know, these quote-unquote reforms tend to favor large companies at the expense of smaller companies and universities and the like. But you know, don't be shy if you want to ask about that. Areas that we're currently really interested in: enhancing absorption and efficiency of medical marijuana and base alkaloids. The fastest growing way to consume medical marijuana in the United States, I don't know, in Europe, is through vaporization. Health Canada came out 2 years ago and said you should vaporize. There are fewer carcinogens created, so it's safer. But what a lot of people don't realize is that when you vaporize THC or nicotine for that matter, the vapor doesn't have the motility to reach the deep areas of the lung. And so really the absorption is happening in the buccal cavity. And once you understand that, then it's some fairly basic pharmacology to condition the oral cavity to improve absorption. So that's something we're really interested in, although we've got a picky examiner that we have to deal with. Commercializing Saturn tablet. We have a tobacco extraction patent that they're certifying for organic e-liquids, and we think you'll hear a lot more from Fuse Media. Thank you for listening. I want to make a special thank you to our dignitaries, but also to our family and friends from Mississauga who came to support us. We really appreciate it.